Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the worship of the Mayor of the Borough of Rushmore.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the public gallery and members of the council. Welcome to this meeting of the full council. As you will see, tonight's meeting is being webcast live through the council's website. Before I open the meeting and commence the formal agenda, would you please remain standing for prayers by my chaplain, the Reverend Steve Stewart.
We thank you for blessing the members and officers in this chamber with the gifts necessary to transact the business of this council. Grant us a spirit of justice, care for the poor and peace. We ask that your wisdom and our humility will be evident in all discussions and decisions made this evening. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the good news of Christmas and the sending of your Son, Jesus Christ, into the world as the Prince of Peace. We remember before you those who mourn the loss of loved ones this year and ask that you will be with them in the memories they share this Christmas time. And so, Heavenly Father, may we seek your strength to work continually for truth and goodwill between peoples. And we pray your peace on this chamber, on our families, and the whole community of Rushmore this Christmas. In Jesus' name, Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Turning now to the formal agenda, item 1 on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the council held on the 5th of October 2017. Do I have a proposer? Is there a seconder? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Item 2 on the agenda is the Mayor's announcement. On the 12th of November, the Deputy Mayor and I attended Remembrance Day services around the borough, and it was nice to see that so many members attended to show their respect. The Mayoress and I will be hosting our Christmas afternoon tea party tomorrow afternoon from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. to raise much needed funds for the charities I am supporting this year. As always, everyone is very welcome, so please do come along. Donations of cakes are always very welcome too, as items for raffles and bring and buy stalls. Last month, Oak Furniture Land donated a Christmas cake which had been made for the official opening of the Farnborough store. The cake was donated to raise funds for my charities. If you would like to purchase raffle tickets, please see Kathy Flatt from Democratic Services after the meeting this evening. The cake will also be on display at my afternoon tea event tomorrow, and tickets will be on sale there and at the council offices for a further week before we begin drawing in time for Christmas on the 15th of December. Item 3 on the agenda is Standing Order 8, questions. I have to report that no questions have been submitted under Standing Order 8.3. Item 4 on the agenda is a petition opposing the proposed closure of Southwood Golf Course, which has been submitted to the Council in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. The petition contains 2,366 signatures. A copy of the first page of the petition is attached at Annex 1 of the agenda. Under the provisions of the scheme, the petition organiser, L. Larson, has a period of up to 10 minutes to present the petition. The scheme does not allow for any further speakers or questions. After the presentation by Ms. Larson, the Council will be asked to consider how to respond to the contents of the petition. I would now like
Thank you and good evening. Before I formally present the petition this evening, I would just like to take a couple of moments to introduce myself and explain why it is that I'm stood here this evening. As the Madam Mayor has kindly said in her introduction, my name is Al Larson and I'm a lifelong resident of the borough and currently studying for my PhD in history. I would also like to say that I am a non-golfer. Why then am I standing here having set up a petition seeking support and asking that Southwood Golf Course remain as it is? My association with the golf course began 10 years ago when my mum took up the hobby, and over that time I've seen how important the sport, the course and the people associated with it have been in offering her support, both as a single parent and as she battled with her mental health. But I've also worked behind the bar in the clubhouse and seen more widely how this, as a facility applies to other people. I worked there to support myself through my studies, and I now identify the golf course as the hub of the local community. The people that work and play there are the people I'd ask for a cup of sugar in a crisis. I truly believe that Southwood Golf Course is a community facility that promotes, harbours community values. It's hugely valuable and yet under-promoted asset to the local area, and I think at times throughout this consultation that's something which has been forgotten. In presenting the petition, I'd like to start by addressing a question posed by one of the councillors at the Youth, Leisure and Environment panels which took place in the beginning of November. Should we take this petition seriously? The advice on Rushmore Borough Council website states that petitions are one of the ways in which people can influence decisions that affect their local community. Anyone who lives, works or studies in the borough, including under 18s, can sign, organise a petition and trigger a response. Helena, Kathy and myself have done just that. We're all residents of Rushmore and have decided to engage and use this medium of expression to capture an even wider response to your proposals regarding the future of Southwood Golf Course. We opted for a petition because there's something inherent about human nature that means not everyone will have filled out a 2 to 3 page survey, but many would and have responded to a simple yes or no question, the kind that a petition offers. Petitions have a precedent in local, regional and national politics, and I was therefore a bit surprised to find a councillor elected by a ward to represent their views to suggest that a petition should not be taken seriously. We began our petition 3 months ago, shortly after we were made aware of the consultation, and to date over 2,500 people have signed the petition. The covering letter for which I understand has been circulated in the minutes of this meeting. This is a substantial number, and one similar to the number who filled in the survey produced by Rushmore Borough Council, the difference being that all our signatories are in favour of Southwood Golf Course remaining in its existing form. Upon submission of the petition just prior to the end of the Council's consultation on the 29th of September, the number of signatories stood at 2,366. And for the purposes of this discussion, I've based my analysis on that figure to provide a like-for-like analysis. So who has signed the petition? As you can see on the slide behind me, which I've included so you can see the visual of the figures, 651 signatories identified themselves as living in Farnborough or Aldershot, 326 within a 5-mile radius of the course, 156 within a 10-mile radius. Then we've got 703 who live over 10 miles from the course and 162 from London. And I think it's notable that, there's a great number of people beyond the immediate area that have signed the petition. People are willing to travel at a quality golf course, which Southwood is. The remainder of these figures are made up of those from Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, which is 66, the rest of the world 95, and 202 people either gave no data or it's not been provided. I would exercise caution at these statistics, as there are some flaws with the ways in which the data has been captured. For instance, people I know who live in Farnborough but have signed the petition at work were not given the option to enter their postcode, and it's defaulted to the business server location, while my own entry is given a country and not the specific location of Farnborough or my postcode because of the security settings I have on my computer. Similarly, those 202 people who have provided no postcode or town data may well be Rushmore residents, we don't know. Furthermore, owing to the nature of the site used to host the petition and the power of social media, we haven't been able to limit responses to Rushmore-only residents. But I think the presence of interest from beyond the immediate area shows wider concerns about the proposals and evidence of usage of Southwood beyond the immediate vicinity. It is, after all, a rare example of a municipal golf course. And finally, the council themselves have run reports on both Eagle Radio and BBC South Today, coverage which has reached beyond Rushmore and may well have also sparked wider response from people. Does that mean the views of those who have signed the petition but are not Rushmore residents should not be considered? I would say not. So what did these people have to say? We're also very fortunate that some of the petitioners took time to write short comments, which allow us to understand their motives for signing the petition. Of the 2,366 who did so, 464 made comments, although again, because of the nature of the website, some of our signatories have reported not being given the option by the website to add comments despite wanting to. Nonetheless, from the examples we can see many reasons that prompted people into action adhere to those highlighted by my colleagues in their presentation at the meeting on the 7th of November. So, for instance, 44 people commented on its affordability, it being said, quote, Farnborough and local areas need to keep this excellent golf course which can be used by everyone, for a reasonable fee. 64 people expressed the view that space should be maintained in its existing form as a golf course. 136 people made comments that aren't particularly easy to place in a single category, but generally reflect the popularity of the course and the view that it's an important local facility. It was said, quote, Rushmore should regard Southwood as a jewel in their crown of sporting facilities and nurture it rather than make the nonsensical decision to close it, unquote. 106 petitioners emphasised the community and family benefits of the course, it being stated this is a valued golf course for the community and should be kept as such for both young and old. And, quote, my son and I learned to play golf here. Fond memories of father and son bonding that I eventually want to expand out to my grandchildren. We would not have taken up golf without the children's lessons that got my son and then me interested in golf. And finally, health and well-being was addressed by a further 52 petitioners. To quote, it's been my lifeline physically, mentally and socially for the past 11 years. And, quote, I took up golf when I retired, and it's the best thing I ever did. I play at Southwood regularly, and I benefit from the exercise and companionship of the other senior players. If the course is closed, I would have to give that up, so please keep it open. At the last meeting, Councillor Tennant described how previous cabinets have spent 10 years scrambling for SANG. I know that I and a number of others after that meeting were left wondering why it's possible that in just over 10 weeks, or 3 months, the Southwood campaign's been able to identify areas of weakness in the policy and suggesting challenging Natural England as a suitable course of action, and not the council in the 10 years they've been dealing with the situation. If Southwood Golf Course is considered the last, if unpalatable option, surely the council and the local MP should have mounted a challenge to central government and Natural England long before now. If the only way to build more housing in the borough is to close leisure facilities, then something's fundamentally wrong with this process. You want to bring more people into the area, but provide them with fewer facilities to use, thus diminishing the quality of life for all residents. Which council-owned leisure facility will you close next when you need more SANG? The future of Southwood Golf Course has attracted huge interest throughout this consultation. People with no interest in golf are concerned about the course closing, and people of the community are seeing its potential closure as a considerable loss. I and the currently 2,579 signatories of this petition share this concern and are putting forward our thoughts for consideration in this consultation. We implore you not to close Southwood Golf Course and turn the land over to SANG. Once this is done, there will be no going back, and a valuable, affordable community facility that promotes health and well-being will be permanently lost. Thank you.
Now return to the public gallery. Members, the debate is now open to discuss the Council's response to the petition. Councillor Canty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that this council notes the petition and that it be referred to the Cabinet for further consideration. We cannot afford a further delay in making a decision on a proposal that is central to delivering additional housing to residents in this borough over the next decade and a half. What is at stake here is the ability for this council to have some control over the nature of future development in Thornbury and Aldershot, and the ability of this council to deliver vital regeneration projects in our town centres. This council has already shown leadership by producing its draft local plan this year, a document designed to guide the location, scale and type of future developments in Rushmore up until 2032. The evidence for our housing need is clear: 436 homes per year, and has been independently verified through the strategic housing market assessment carried out by Wessex Economics in 2016. Now is the time to move forward. The government's housing white paper made it clear that if a local authority has not submitted a draft local plan by January 2018, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government has the power to intervene. Now, what does that mean in practice? It means the central government has the power to take control of developing a plan for a local authority and impose a strategy on housing development from above. That can mean a large quantity of housing type being imposed, for example, high-rise developments, that doesn't meet the needs of many local people. Ultimately, when our draft local plan is independently examined by a planning inspector in February, its successful failure will rest on the issue of whether we have enough mitigation through SANG. During the consultation process, some have tried to attack the basis of the Council's argument on the importance of SANG to meeting housing need, but our hands are simply tied here. With our local plan due for examination, our refusal to abide by this regulation would effectively surrender the ability of this council to guide local development and ensure Rushmore residents are able to access those homes that are desperately needed. Moving forward with this proposal is the only way to ensure that this council has control of its own destiny when it comes to delivering the crucial affordable housing in this borough and delivering the vital regeneration of our town centres. So, Madam Mayor, I move that this council notes the petition and that it be referred to the Cabinet for further consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Canty. Do we have a seconder for the petition for it to be referred? Councillor John Marsh? You may.
May I speak now? Thank you. In his preamble, Councillor Canty has made the case for moving forward with the proposals in the local plan. The petitioners want the golf course retained, but that would put in jeopardy the Rushmore local plan. I would like to point out that a lot has been mentioned about health and well-being. It is worth remembering that even if, and I use that word if, the golf course is closed, the land becomes public open space, available for the whole population, not just those who play golf. But that is correct. That's what will happen. It will become open. The land will become public open space for the use of everybody. The Cabinet, the Magnificent Seven, must take account of both points of view when they come to their decision. So I therefore formally second the proposal that the Cabinet take note of this petition when they consider the matter at their meeting on December the 12th. Thank you.
The motion to be debated out now is the revised motion for it to be put to the Cabinet. Councillor Les Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would certainly support this petition going to the Cabinet, and it must be taken with all seriousness. During my tenure as a councillor, rarely has there actually been a subject that's divided opinion amongst the public and councillors such as this. The consultation on the future of Southwood Golf Course was split virtually 50-50 when taking into account those who live within the borough. We heard campaigners at the joint panel meeting of Tuesday the 7th of November speak very passionately in their support of the continuation of Southwood Golf Course. We have now formally received the campaigners' petition against closure, which contains some 2,500 signatures. The councillors of the joint panel, of which I was one, considered and thoroughly debated the subject and voted in favour of deferring any decision on Southwood Golf Course for 12 months. This was to enable all other options to be investigated, including lobbying the government for special dispensation or a change in legislation. Undoubtedly, the Cabinet has a difficult decision to make on the 12th of December, as there is general agreement that we need the resultant housing and to preserve the integrity of the local plan. This will be a real test, however, on the Cabinet's willingness to listen to the passionate actions and voices of the campaigners, the support given to them by the public via the petition, and the considered recommendation for deferment made by the joint panel. There may be political ramifications too, since some of us councillors have previously said that our policy and review panels are more about listening and noting rather than scrutinising. If the Cabinet goes against our joint panel recommendation for deferment, it may indicate that the Cabinet considers recommendations made by the policy and review panels to be of very little relevance. The Cabinet will need to think very carefully about its connection with the public and the future panel structure of the Council should it decide to ignore and override all the evidence that has been put to it in support of Southwood Golf Course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Barry Jones.
That's handy, it's still on. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was a little bit curious about Councillor Canty's assertion that if we failed to make this decision urgently, we would lose control of the local plan and we might have the requirement for massive high-rise blocks imposed on the borough. This really puzzled me, because are we saying that the National Planning Inspectorate has the power to override Natural England in what their recommendations are? Can someone, when the Cabinet takes these matters into account, can they please consider exactly what powers we would be losing should our local plan be overridden by the National Inspectorate? If we take, if in future we accept plans that do not include appropriate sand, and we choose to accept them, does Natural England have the power of veto? If not, what is the purpose of making this decision? There are a number of things that I believe that the Cabinet needs to take into account that are not clear to me as an ordinary member of this Council, and I believe aren't clear to members of the public who really cannot see exactly what we are gaining and what we are losing by going ahead with this proposal. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Alex Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I first say how much we appreciate how the residents and the supporters of Southwood Golf Course have engaged fully in the Council's consultation and in signing the petition. It's been very helpful in us considering it. And what I would say is, for our part, our top priority is for this council to provide genuinely affordable housing for local people who need it. But we also share the aspirations of all members of this council to regenerate our town centres so that they are sustainable into the future and to provide leisure and recreation for our residents. Now, we're clear what's at stake here. SANG for 2,500 homes, new homes to be built in the borough, towards the 3,000 identified in the local plan, with current government requirements up to 2032. Now, that represents some £750 million worth of homes, and depending on scarcity value, some £25 million worth of SANG, although the report to next week's Cabinet puts its worth at £6 million. For Wellington Ward and Aldershot, at present, the Council is looking for SANG for 730 new homes, £220 million worth of homes to regenerate the town centre, needing some £7 million worth of SANG. However, despite the significant number of homes and demand for regeneration, we don't need to rush into this decision, despite what Councillor Canty said. For example, there are many objections to the local plan, which the planning inspector will need to be considering next year. So it won't be a case that this is the only objection that will hold things up. We also have the decision last month of the joint panel that they wanted all the options considered. And what I would say, it's a bit of a derogation of this council's duty to simply follow this rather weak reference of the petition forward to next week's Cabinet. It should be the job of this council tonight to instruct the Cabinet on what they want done about it. And I believe that we should oppose this current proposal from Councillor Canty, and that we should vote against simply noting the petition, and that we should be instructing the Cabinet to follow the directions of the joint panel of that met last month. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Rod Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Back in 2000, long before I became a councillor, I found myself in the situation of being on the housing waiting list. Having been made redundant for the 5th time and having had my house repossessed. How can we as a council turn round to the 1,400 people on the housing waiting list today and say to them, we cannot permit any further housing development because the members of this council are not prepared to take tough decisions that are needed, as opposed to not allowing this land to be turned into SANG. Unlike my Champagne socialist colleagues, who live in £400,000 homes and constantly whinge about the lack of social housing, I fully support the change to SANG, allowing this council to give the less advantaged people of this community the housing they so desperately need. The Conservatives are the party that care about the community.
May I remind members that in any discussion that you stick to the amended motion, which is referring the petition to the Cabinet. Councillor Morris-Sheehan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support the proposal to refer the petition to the Cabinet, where it can be considered alongside all other responses to the consultation. Many people associate golf with Donald Trump and silly trousers. So writes a contributor to Here for Rushmore. Of all the famous people associated with the game of golf, the Labour Party chose Donald Trump, a man renowned for his racist comments, a man with no conscience, a self-publicist, a man synonymous with fake news. Good choice, Labour. Incredible though it sounds, the Farnborough and Cove Branch Labour Party couldn't even get the name of the golf course right. It's Southwood, not Southview Labour councillors. I trust that their wannabe cub reporter has a sharper pencil tonight. The Natural Environment and Communities Act, brought in by the last Labour government, created Natural England, which Councillor Bridgman describes as the villains of the piece. Section 40 of the Act lays down a statutory duty on public authorities like Rushmore to conserve biodiversity and states conserving biodiversity includes, in relation to a living organism or type of habitat, restoring or enhancing a population or habitat. Well, isn't that exactly what the Thames Basin avoidance measures are setting out to achieve? Encouraging people away from the lowland heath areas and protect and enhance the habitat and increase the bird population. Councillor Bridgman was quite dismissive about the plight of the Dartford warbler. But as everyone knows, this is about much more than the Dartford warbler. It's about protecting the unique ecology of the lowland heathland that surrounds our borough.
Councillor Sheehan, this is about the referral.
I know, and this is why it's important that the petition gets considered back to the Cabinet, Madam Mayor. The Dartford warbler, the nightjar and the woodlark are three species named in the framework, but in reality we are talking about all the birds, mammals, reptiles and amphibians that inhabit these areas, as well as the myriad of invertebrates and the rich and diverse plant life that are all ecologically interdependent. Councillor Bridgman asked us to defer making a decision about Southwood for at least a year. And there was I thinking that the Labour Party were promising to speed up house building in the same way that they were promising to wipe out student debt. Obviously, I was mistaken. Maybe it was a dream. That was it. It was all a dream. And you were there, and you were there, and a big house fell on the wicked witch. No, Madam Mayor. Last May, Councillor Bridgman boasted that he was at the forefront of seeking to regenerate Aldershot. I am battling strongly to repair the damage done by years of Tory mismanagement and neglect, he told us. A decent home is your right. Too many people are unable to afford a decent home in Aldershot. Your Labour councillors are leading the battle to tackle this scandal. Labour, the first army in history to lead into battle, waving a truce. Into the valley of Southwood rode the 11. Dilly-dally to the right of them. Dilly-dally to the left of them. Dilly-dally in front of them. Not so much volleyed and thundered, more stumbled and blundered as they pussyfooted their way round an awkward decision. In June, Councillor Bridgman scurried off to Basingstoke, promising to build 1 million new homes there. Councillor Axel Crawford, who we heard from this evening, has made it quite clear where his group's position is. Writing on Facebook, he says housing has to be Labour's top priority everywhere, so we need a massive building programme. So there we have it, a Labour Party that created Natural England, legislated to protect wild habitats, and a Labour Party that wants a massive building programme. Yet their councillors have the gall to sit in this chamber and proclaim themselves the saviours of golf, and they can't even get the name of the golf course right. What they haven't told you is why they intend to build all these additional homes. Labour's new deal for housing makes it perfectly clear, on public sector land. Now I wonder where they'll find such a large parcel of public sector land. There are 71 families from this borough sleeping in temporary accommodation. That's 61 children who have nowhere to call home. The average stay in temporary accommodation is 7 months. One room in which to eat, sleep and live your life. Local residents are crying out for us to get on with regenerating our town centres. The demand for new housing is now, so we don't have the luxury of hanging around while Labour councillors kick the can down the street. Last week, 297 rounds of golf were played at Southwood. What is unknown is how many people would have accessed Southwood had it been available for everyone to enjoy. So put very simply, the question we need to ask ourselves Does Southwood continue to meet the needs of our local residents, or is there a better way to use this land?
Build on it then.
Thank you, Councillor Sheehan. Councillor Martin Tennant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've certainly listened with interest in some of my colleagues, and I fully support the petition being brought forward to Cabinet to be considered when the decision is made. I reject the rationale to wait and see and investigate other avenues. We've been doing this for a period of time. Let me set out clearly what's at stake. If we had the time available to sit and wait and our local plan wasn't for submission, then of course additional work needs to be done. Even after the submission and the decision has been made, available land for SAN is finite, so work will need to be done. We will need to lobby and ensure that Natural England review at the utmost speed their position on mitigation and look at alternative mechanisms for mitigation. But we do not have the option now to not make a decision, to defer the decision. The members of the Labour group who are on the steering committee for the local plan are fully aware of the consequences for the residents. It's not just a question of rogue developers or lack of control. It's each and every policy in that document. The policy on homelessness, Councillor Crawford, the one you objected to when it came to full council. The policy protecting areas of North Town, Councillor Dibble, the one you were so keen to amend to ensure that the post office was protected. Each and every one of you in the Labour group has had input into this document over the last 5 years. We have shaped it as a council to represent the wants and desires of our residents. So, that's what's at stake. That's why a decision needs to be made. Yes, we can argue whether the government could make better decisions on housing, but there isn't a member here who doesn't want to have local control. There isn't a member here who doesn't feel passionately about something in their ward. So, the choice is really simple. I support this going to Cabinet to make a decision. With all this information, I am pleased that residents have commented in their droves on this. I am pleased that there's been a petition so we can address this fully. But don't think that doing nothing is an option or delaying making a decision is an option. This is what has historically happened in this authority, and it cannot happen now. We are at the 11th hour. A decision must be made. So we can play to the gallery as much as we want about put it off, don't worry about it. But I ask you now, will you be able to look at your residents, the ones who have told you what they want protected, what you have lobbied and ensured is protected in this document? It's been 5 years' work, the local plan. Members have attended numerous meetings, document by document, policy by policy. Your councillor behind you has spent many an hour ensuring that everything is considered and moving forward for the next period of time for this local plan. Now things change. We may find ourselves in a different situation, but what we will have is a framework designed for local people, by local people, with our control, not at the whim of some bureaucrat miles away. So the question I ask is, if we defer, are you prepared to lose that control, to lose that influence you've already asserted? I think not. So now is not the time for procrastination. It is to note this, pass it to Cabinet, allow Cabinet to make a decision. Have the honesty to realise that that is the only option, and that you would be betraying your residents and we would be betraying our residents if we didn't move forward on producing a framework which represents what they require, and all political parties have been involved in its manufacture. So I am in full support of the petition being noted and it coming forward to Cabinet. And I urge members to support it too. And I urge members within the Labour Party to not put it in the long finger, not to move away from this issue. You have affected these documents, you have supported their creation, and you should now have the honesty to appreciate that delay is not an option. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Just a reminder again to members, any further discussion is about noting the petition and referral to the Cabinet. Councillor Jeremy Priest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I am no champagne socialist. I live in a very ordinary little house in Hague Road. That's the first thing. And secondly, I don't play to the galleries. I leave that to people who obviously didn't manage to get the part in the pantomime. The fact of the matter is, we saw democracy really in action when we had our joint meeting, at which I know a number of people behind me, as well as some of my colleagues, were at, and we discussed this issue openly, and we decided and we realised that actually it's not the straightforward yes, no, black and white scenario that has actually been presented. What we found, what we know to be true, is that by getting rid of the golf course or creating some sand, you're not necessarily guaranteeing that you're going to have all these social housing. There's all kinds of other issues, things which happen in practice where less social housing than promised is delivered, and you find that a lot of houses which are built because that's the developer's objective are actually unaffordable by most people. And that's where the champagne and it's the champagne people who then move in, and it's like a form of social cleansing if we're not careful. That's the point. The thing is, we all used to have this thing about civic pride, and the golf course, I understand that, it's something which is for the public, it's something that both parties used to actually support, public amenities for the public, and it seems that anything that is public is willing to be sacrificed, and I think that is also part of the issue here. Unfortunately, just sending things over to the Cabinet, we know what the Cabinet decision is going to be. It's not as if it's going to be off to have some sort of long discussion. I think it's very clear that they're just going to say we need to close the golf course. But there were other options discussed at the joint meeting, and I'm very sorry if that is all closed off, because the issue is that that amenity, which has been around for a lot of years, when it's gone, it's gone. And that's thank you. I'll leave it now. We carry on now. I'll leave the question now. No.
We have a few more speakers, so you can wait. Councillor Keith Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand to speak to the proposal, and like my leader, Councillor Crawford, say it should be rejected, and the Cabinet Council tonight should endorse the decision of the Joint Panel of Environmental and Leisure Services. Also, I don't come here tonight to be lectured by Tories on the plight of the homeless, when their government for the last 7 years has failed miserably to address the housing problem. And the reason why people are homeless in Aldershot is not because we have or haven't closed the golf course, it's because of the government's failure on housing policy. And for Tories to say, we've got to be honest with our electorate, well, I'll tell you who's as honest with our electorate. Councillor Sue Dibble, Councillor Frank Russ, Councillor Andy Straker, Councillor Caroline Culver and Councillor Jim White, who argued for the best part of 25 years to get the North Town estate redeveloped. We now have the My North Town project moving forward, providing more and more quality homes for local people. That's what Labour policy is on housing. And to say that by deferring this for a year, we're stopping all of the housing building in the borough is complete rubbish. How many houses has this authority granted permission for that have yet to be built? Are we really saying that the future of Aldershot and Farnborough Town Centre is in the grip of a golf course of 18 holes? Because if that's the case, and if you're also saying that the local plan is dependent on a proposal coming forward at the 11th hour, 59th minute, I would say that's appalling government. That isn't a forward-thinking local authority. That's a local authority making decisions on panic and scrambling around. How can we find this land? So I think it's right to delay for a year to consider all the options. And if in a year's time we come back and there are no alternatives, that difficult decision may have to be made. But why rush tonight? Why rush when this model Tory authority is petrified that a Tory Secretary of State for local government will throw that plan out the window and say it's rubbish? You know, you're now saying you're incompetent because you're making a late decision, and two, you haven't got the confidence in the plan because a Tory if only it was, a Tory Secretary of State is going to throw it out. What's the problem? So, I think Council tonight should endorse the decisions made by the Environment and Leisure and Youth panel. They should note that decision, but also endorse that decision. And Cabinet on Tuesday had the opportunity to be an open, engaging, democratic body, or just chuck it out and say, this is what we're doing. But why, at the 11th hour, 59th minute, did the Southwood plan come out of the wherever to become the saviour of the towns of Aldershot and Farnborough? Where is the planning application coming in for all these houses in Aldershot Town Centre? Where is the guarantee that there will be social housing and affordable rents for local people? Where? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Peterbill. Councillor Terry Bridgman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I say thank you to Councillor Sheehan for those 7 or 8 name checks. Perhaps we're getting into the round of the next set of council elections. I have to tell you, Councillor Sheehan, in that case, you're aiming at the wrong target. The chairman of the Councillor Tennant used the word honesty, as if to try and persuade you all that the Conservatives are honest and the Labour Party are. Well, are you honestly saying that all these houses are in hop to a golf course? It's the golf course or the housing. Is that what you're saying? Of course it's not. That's not true. And nor, of course, is the fact that we will all benefit from the area of natural woodland, which Councillor Sheehan eulogised about, yet at the same time told us that the object of the exercise is to keep the public away from.
Mayor, the direct question has been put that there is a decision to be made on whether housing can be built without sand. And I say yes, it is true that you cannot build housing in the borough without... Would you allow me to get to that? You asked the question, I answered it, Councillor Bridgman.
Getting a little bit touchy here, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Sheehan said, you know, that the idea of having this woodland would be to protect the habitat of certainly the Dartford warbler and others by keeping the public away. What is the point? What is the point of us having this extra woodland if we can't use it? Because we're being persuaded not to go there because of the birds and whatever we use it. Councillor Tennant, I can understand why he's getting... Sorry?
The debate is about
yes,
the petition.
and I can understand why Councillor Tennant is getting worried about that, because he made his exact points at the joint meeting. And I will make the exact points that we made then. There is no hurry. Councillor Dibble made it quite clear We're not going to start building those houses tomorrow. The borough plan isn't in danger if we hold back for a year to see if we can do something about the Sands. The real problem is that this group, this Conservative group, the Cabinet, have not taken on board the fact that we are being held to ransom by Nature England, when really we should be challenging not just the imposition of the Sands, but also the basis on which they work out their housing allowances. You should be attacking the right target. Don't take it out on the Labour group that you haven't been able to do that. We will support you in building houses in Aldershot, in Farnborough. We know as much as you do that it's important, but we do not think that you are going the right way about doing it.
I have one more speaker. After the speakers, I will call upon Councillor Canty to sum up. Councillor David Clifford.
There we go. Good. Right, thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, I support this motion for it to come to our Cabinet 12th of December to consider. I want to assure you that we absolutely get it. We absolutely understand. And can I just thank the petitioner? Can I thank the people that are associated with the golf course for coming here? We've listened, we've heard, we've been out to the golf course, we've visited, we understand the passion that you have. Many of us are involved with clubs, we feel passionate about our clubs, and I totally understand your concern about the golf club. In fact, one of our own Conservative members has got a relative that was a founder member of the golf club. This is not a position that we wish to be in. Just a bit of background, I spoke to some of you in the public gallery, trying to get your head round this bizarre situation where we have to consider using the golf club as this thing called SANG, a special area of natural green space. Sorry. Special alternative. Anyway, SANG. But trying to explain why we need this, and I can imagine it's complex for many of us councillors getting our heads around where we've got this European legislation that came out. Well, thank you for your interjection. Stand for election next May. And then
we have order. Please, can we have order?
The point is that we've got legislation that's extremely important that we follow, especially with a local plan that we spent about 1.4 million bringing to this stage. One of our priorities is regeneration and building homes for local people. Now, I've had councillors come up, and can I just say that I totally respect our Labour councillors. I would not dream of impugning that they've got impure motives. We have differences of opinion, but it stops there. Can I just make absolutely clear, I have total respect for all the members of this chamber and allow them the right to express their views and expect the same in return. The point is that with this legislation that we've got, with the local plan that's bringing through, and we've got all sorts of things. We've got SANGs, we've got special protection areas, we've got special spaces of scientific interest, we've got all sorts of things that totally engulf our borough, and we're quite unique. This area covers just 11 local authorities. It doesn't cover the whole of Britain, it's specific to 11 local authorities. Of that 11 local authorities, there's only 3 whose total area are covered by this legislation. That means it restricts our building. 3 local authorities, and we're one of them. So we haven't got any spaces in our borough where we can escape this legislation. Now, we are talking to Natural England, we're talking to government. We're hoping we can find a solution. We want to find a solution. Some of it, I agree with you, is totally barking mad. But it's legislation that's there and is very clear. We've got sang for a handful of homes to be built. That's all we've got. We are determined to deliver regeneration and homes. And one councillor said, you're not going to do affordable homes, you're not going to do that. We are totally committed to regeneration. And I promise you one thing, if we do not find sang, we won't just not have homes, we definitely won't have affordable homes. And we're determined that we are going to drive forward with our local plan and build local homes, and we are going to deliver affordable homes for local people. Thank you very much. So I recommend you refer this to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. And I call upon Councillor Canty to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been a lot of talk in this debate about affordable housing. I just want to make clear that our housing assessment shows that we need 160 affordable rented homes and 220 intermediate homes a year. Delaying this proposal will mean hundreds of local people every year will have to wait even longer to get a foot on the ladder of opportunity. This would be a betrayal to those residents on the housing waiting list and akin to pulling a rug from under their feet. The Council's proposal gives us the best chance of meeting our housing needs, supplying the largest amount of sang by far with all the options available. And in addition, a vital green space in this borough will be protected for decades from development. So in conclusion, Madam Mayor, I move that the question now be put.
Thank you, Councillor Canty. Councillor Rust. So just to be clear, that the petition be noted and be referred to the Cabinet for discussion at its meeting on 12th of December 2017 will now be put to the vote.
So will members indicate for or against the proposal or wish to abstain? Councillor Bedford? Councillor Bell? Councillor Bridgman?
Yes.
Councillor Canty? Councillor Carter? Councillor Charles Chowdhury? Councillor Clifford? Councillor Cooper? Councillor Core? Councillor Crawford?
Yes.
Councillor Carrar? Councillor Keith Dibble?
Against.
Councillor Sue Dibble? Councillor Jennifer Evans? Councillor Gladstone? Councillor Grattan?
Against.
Councillor Barbara Hurst? Councillor Jackman? Councillor Jones?
Against.
Councillor Lyon? Councillor Marsh? Councillor Munro? Councillor Muschamp? Councillor Newell? Councillor Priest?
Against.
Councillor Roberts?
Against.
Councillor Rust? Councillor Sheehan? Councillor Smith? Councillor Les Taylor?
Against.
Councillor Paul Taylor? Councillor Tennant? Councillor Thomas? Councillor Jackie Vosper? Present. Councillor Woolley? The Deputy Mayor? The Mayor. Yeah, carry on.
That's carried. Members of the public wish to leave the meeting may do so. Members, we are now moving on with the meeting. So item 5 on the agenda is to consider a notice of motion submitted by Councillor Roberts under Standing Order 9.1 on the National Health Service.
You're not going to be quiet because you're out doing speaking. Thank you very much, Mayor. I apologise if I start coughing, but I'm on Fisherman's Friend Extra Strong tonight. The motion itself is very matter of fact. It covers particular areas which have been very focused in on, not only by many people outside, all the trade unions, the various groupings, societies, etc., but also by the Health Select Committee and others. And I'm going to refer to start off with the Health Select Committee last July, which I attended. We had Simon Stevens, who of course was very famous for being an executive in United Health and putting forward the ACO programme at Davos, and also Jeremy Hunt. They were saying that the sustainable transportation programmes were being funded to a tune of 10 billion, when in fact the committee said, no, this is utter rubbish, it's only 4.5 billion. So we started off by having those untruths, lies, or whatever you like to call them, last year, and it's just gone downhill from then on in. As of today, we had a situation this morning, I'll come on this afternoon, we had a situation this morning that the SDP for Frimley Health was looking at the projected deficit of 236 million by 2021, of which of course it is important to us. And the other one which we're involved with locally was the Hampshire and Isle of Wight, where the elimination of a projected 2021 deficit was 577 million. And at the July Health Committee, it was said by both of them that we were looking at a 5-year forward review. But of course it wasn't. It was then 4 years, and now it's only 3.5 years. So what has come out this afternoon? Well, astonishingly, today we have had a statement from government that the ministers are going to push forward the creation of accountable care organisations without proper parliamentary scrutiny by early February. One of the 8 original ACOs is Frimley Health, which is obviously one of those that covers our area. And I find, as many other people do, this is absolutely astonishing. Now, the government at the moment is on this course of, if it can get away without any scrutiny in Brexit, or it doesn't have the right information in relationship to Mr Davis going before the appropriate committee, then it will do so. Now, to have a situation where ACOs are not going to have any parliamentary scrutiny at all is absolutely astonishing. Obviously, we, from our side, have put forward an early day motion 660 to make sure, in the name of our Shadow Secretary of State for Health, John Ashworth, that this matter is discussed and raised, because it is far-reaching. ACOs, which is what the Stevens paper at Davos stated from the work that he had done in America, are all about the privatisation in part or whole of the SDP areas. Now, there are 44 SDP areas, one of which is ours, and as a pilot scheme. So the impacts are going to be enormous, and there will not be any proper scrutiny whatsoever. I just find that absolutely appalling. But it seems to be the state of what we have to put up with the government at the present point in time. And I ask, therefore, that members of this council do note the full ramifications, the additional ramifications of in the last few hours this afternoon, and vote for this particular motion. Many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second, Madam Mayor, and I reserve the right to speak later.
Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, this motion before us is as ridiculous as it is insulting. Before I go any further, I'd like to warn those proposing this motion that they are skating on very thin ice, accusing the government of acting illegal in this matter. Indeed, unless they are confident of defending a liable charge, they may wish to withdraw such a claim pretty promptly. But on the main issue, let's be clear. No one on this side of the council chamber will take any lectures from Labour on the NHS. Let's remember that under the Conservative government, the NHS is receiving more funding than ever before, with further billions having devoted in the most recent budget, meaning that spending is increasing well ahead of the rate of inflation and far faster than Labour had pledged it would in 2015. Set this against a Labour Party which ran the NHS into the ground, which brought you the Mid-Staffs Hospital disaster with thousands of deaths, which oversaw the rampant rise of MRSA and C. difficile, and which has handed over tens of billions of pounds to private developers in the form of failing, extortionate PFI contracts. I have personally experienced superb care from Frimley Park Hospital and elsewhere in recent years for my knee surgery. What made the whole experience far better than might have otherwise have been was the level of coordination which existed between the NHS and other services, a level of coordination which helped with my recovery and delivered better health outcomes. Sadly, this is not always the case, particularly when we look at the interactions between our health and social care systems. Primary care providers, care homes, inpatient care and support services too often run off different systems, meaning that patients are passed from pillar to post at the time when they are most vulnerable. Accountable care organisations are a way of putting patients back in the centre of healthcare. Yes, there are similar models in the US as a result of Obamacare. There are also similar models in places like Denmark, Sweden, France, Spain and Switzerland. In all of these cases, the common thread has been providing high-quality, patient-centred healthcare free at the point of use. They are furthermore being offered advice on how to run health system counsellor, who I have seen try and fail to run a tap. But we do, of course, know that the patient-centred healthcare system is not what the proposer has in mind, as is ideal. To know what they want, we have to examine the systems that he and his chums in the Momentum and Mr. Corbyn have been praising so long. The frankly inhuman health systems in Venezuela, Bolivia and Cuba. Systems where access to the most basic treatment is limited, where preventable deaths are in their tens of thousands, and hospitals where you're more likely to get gangrene than stem cell therapy. I'm therefore calling not just my group, but on UKIP councillors and the long-suffering Blairite wing of the Labour Party to back my amendment to this motion and delete everything after the first paragraph ending in NHS. Let's lose the nonsense and put the focus back where it belongs, not on the paranoid fantasies of or momentum-induced madness on the patient. I would like to mention how proud I am that in Rushmore we have the Aldershot Centre for Health, and commend the Council's work with the CCG in securing the new Farnborough Health Centre that is proposed to open in Southwood. This shows exactly this collaboration in practice between the NHS and other local bodies such as this Council. I would therefore like to propose the amendment at the end of paragraph 1 and insert the following. Rushmore is commended as a council on behalf of its residents to supporting the founding aims of the NHS. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
He just wants to have the first paragraph and that's it.
Cooper, have you just proposed an amendment to the motion?
I have, Madam Mayor.
Please, could you repeat it?
It's on your briefing note.
Rushmore is committed as a council on behalf of its residents to supporting the founding aims of the NHS.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Charles Chowdhury, do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the proposal put forward by Councillor Cooper. I reserve the right to speak later on. Thank you very much.
So the amendment is now for debate, although it's more of a statement. So what is now for discussion?
At this point of order, Madam Mayor, what Councillor Cooper said was delete everything after the phrase he has just said. That's his amendment.
Yeah, we do understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. So now that what will be put to the council is deleting everything after aims of the NHS.
Yes.
So Rushmore is committed as a council on behalf of its residents to support the founding aims of the NHS. So the discussion will now be on the amendment.
I wonder if you would care to repeat that.
No, I think we've had it last time.
Well,
sorry, Councillor
very much opposed to. Yes.
You're not next on the list, I'm afraid.
I thought you called me.
Councillor Adrian Newell.
You called me. Yeah.
Oh no, she didn't.
What was she calling me for?
She can't wake up over there in the corner.
First date, I think. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The NHS should not be used to put forward ideological nonsense. Councillor Robertson's motion says that ACOs are solely a form of privatisation, but they are not that at all. Therefore, I support the amendment that Councillor Cooper has put forward. The Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, ACCA, the OECD, recently produced a report called Better Ways to Pay for Healthcare, which under its own name has the strapline Better Policies for Better Lives. Interestingly, there's a whole chapter on what are called population-based healthcare provider payments, and what are also called accountable care organisations or public-private partnerships. Councillor Cooper is right. Not just the United States, they also use policy elsewhere, including the gold standard country of Germany, Spain, Singapore, New Zealand, Netherlands and Portugal. Therefore, the idea of using ACO should not be considered a bad thing, but one possible method of achieving and maintaining a world-class institution. And lastly, and something far more important, is that we leave an NHS that is there and can be used for generations to come. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. Councillor Alex Crawford.
I would say, Madam Mayor, I think that Councillor Rod Cooper has said how grateful he is to Frimley Park and so on. I really wish they would come up with a cure for this anti-Labour sentiment, because it's getting a bit out of hand. As I'm also a patient at Frimley Park Hospital, I'm very sorry that it's going to be at risk this year, and I'm definitely opposed to his proposal to delete all consideration of what these risks are. And what I would say is that in the budget last month, the Chancellor gave the NHS 1.6 billion extra funding. That was much less than the 4 billion that the NHS England Chief Executive Officer Simon Stevens said was needed. It leaves NH England having to make efficiency savings, which are impossible when demand for services and costs are rising faster than inflation. That's why we need to just forget about this amendment. We need to consider what the motion's actually about. And Frimley Health will be no exception to those cuts, these efficiency savings. And the greatest risk was referred to by Councillor Newell is this so-called accountable care system. It's based on the American style of accountable care organisation. And all the NHS accountable care organisations plans require massive funding cuts. They assume that pooling NHS and local authority resources and expanding care in the community will justify cutting hospital budgets, and that includes Frimley Park Hospital. The National Audit Office and Nuffield Trust have demolished these assumptions, but still the government goes on. Now, Frimley Health and Care System is defined by the NH England as an area in which commissioners and providers, in partnership with local authorities, take explicit collective responsibilities for resources and population health. But what is alarming is the wishful thinking about government funding, which was exposed in the budget last month, and about the prospects for savings and reduction in demand for services. And we know that Frimley's plan was drafted in secret on the basis our plan doesn't include any issues that require public consultation. So much for local democracy and accountability. We're going to be required over the next few years to make efficiency savings at Frimley Park 3% a year. And they're going to reduce demand. That's people like us going for services by 1% a year, they say. Despite the significant growth in population and the ever-increasing number of elderly patients. So, the sense of pending crisis did increase last month before the budget when Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive Officer of NHS England, challenged the government. And he said that if they didn't give the increase in funding that he was requesting, waiting lists for routine surgery in England would rise 25% to 5 million. And that will include in our area. He also asked where would the Brexit dividend of 350 million a week, when would that be forthcoming? So the Frimley plan, which is currently being pushed through, makes assumption of efficiency savings of 176 million by 2020-21. The government has failed to address the social care crisis, which this Frimley Accountable Care Organisation is supposed to solve themselves. The danger is that the health and care of our communities will be underfunded and cut drastically as a precursor to privatisation and exploitation by these US-style corporations. And that has already happened elsewhere in the UK. You have been warned.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Could you just explain where we are? Are we on the amendment? Is it now substantive now?
No, we're on the amendment.
The discussion is on the amendment.
Is it now substantive though?
No, it's not.
It's not substantive until it's Councillor David South.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't often speak for long, but there's a few words that I'd like to put to my colleagues here. Having worked for many years in the NHS, I have very good knowledge about the problems that it faces and the something to nothing ideas that politicians request frequently. All political parties and all individuals support the NHS without exception. And yet we have constant political bickering about the NHS, constant target changes, new ways of managing departments, new favoured areas of care highlighted. All of this has resulted in the chaos that we now see in front of us. It's not the patient, it's the politician. That's the problem. Can anyone here say how recent politics has helped the NHS in any way? No, you can't. There is no doubt that the NHS needs to be brought up to date. How will this be done? Certainly not by political parties bickering. I would like to suggest that the motion be amended to read. Not quite sure whether I can amend an amendment.
No, you can't.
But anyway, I'll make the suggestion, whether you like it or not. I suggest that the RBC Rushmore Borough Council declares that it will support moves to remove the NHS from the political arena and to run the NHS as a fully supported, independent, charitable body.
Like Natural England, maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking against the amendment, but I'll give Councillor Cooper some advice first of all. If you're going to make a speech, write it yourself, and don't get someone else to do it for you. Or don't print off loads of notes from head office, because if you're going to make a speech, you want people to have the belief that you know what you're talking about. And you obviously didn't. And you made some stupid comments, didn't you, about Venezuela and Latin America and the mental and all this other stuff. So that's why the amendment should be opposed, because if Councillor Cooper was a historian and he thought about the creation of the Beveridge NHS, the Conservatives, led by William Churchill, opposed the introduction of the NHS. With the doctors? As did the doctors. Doctors always been at war with the government. When the final reading went through on in July 1948, 337 votes for the creation of the NHS, 178 Tories against the NHS. So there we are. And we got accused of hypocrisy earlier on. Frimley Park is a good hospital, and it's important that we ensure that it continues to be so. And I was taken in Frimley Park on Bank Holiday Monday, August Bank Holiday Monday of this year. And I don't know whether Councillor Sheen will be pleased or shocked by this. But I got taken in and they whipped me up to the private hall. They did. They took me there. Obviously, they could check, by my sartorial evidence that I was right for a private ward. And the administrator came down with a clipboard and asked me what insurance company was I with. Was it a company insurance link with UPA or something like that? And I said, yes, I am part of the scheme. The NHS, I pay, income tax at the highest rate, and therefore I deserve the best treatment. With that, she departed. So, champagne socialist, certainly not me, a Martin bitter socialist, yes. But I think, Councillor Cooper, your amendment is an embarrassment to this council tonight. You did know what you were talking about, and if you're going to sue me, I'm not a champagne socialist, I'm just a poor working man. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The amendment should be opposed.
Councillor Clive Ratton.
Oh, well, I can actually put my hand up, but I didn't say something. But going forward on that, is anybody paying attention?
No.
I have been from my part hospital on 3 occasions with other operations. Unlike Mr. Cooper, mine have all gone wrong. And it says a lot for our system, but I am full support of the National Health System. I think it's a brilliant system, and we ought to fund it to the maximum possible and not allow anything to go privatised. So that's why I'm against this motion, and I feel that we should just go ahead with the original motion, not the amendment. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Councillor Terry Richmond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm the one with the sleeve on. Madam Mayor, I have to say, despite the things that my colleagues have been saying about Councillor Cooper, I absolutely agree with him. Yes, fine. I'm not going to support him because this is not a motion. I don't know what dark recesses of his mind this has come out of, but the preamble, I mean, it had Councillor Sheehan laughing, so it must have been good. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I'm absolutely in favour of our NHS, it's absolutely fantastic, probably one of the best things the Labour government ever did, and I support it. I'm not going to support this because it doesn't ask us to do anything, there isn't a recommendation there, it's just a statement of fact which every member of this council agrees with. At least I hope you all agree with it. But I don't blame the likes of Councillor Newell and Councillor Crawford for taking the opportunity to speak to the original motion, because I've got a feeling that in a moment we're going to have a guillotine and we're not going to get the chance. We will vote against it, honestly, but we are in favour of Councillor Robertson's original motion. But yes, NHS, bring it on, we all love it.
Councillor Richmond. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At its best, we have a world-class health service in this country. So I don't think there's a single person in this chamber who would disagree with the first sentence of the motion. And therefore, I'm delighted to support the amendment. We are in Advent, a time for preparation, of anticipation, and that something good is on its way, longing for hope. So let me share with you one young person's experience through our local health services. Just over 3 years ago, this child's behaviour changed dramatically from being a happy, outward-looking girl to withdrawn, angry and insular. When she started self-harming, cutting her arms and legs with a blade, the family took her to their GP. The GP's initial response was that there was nothing worrying and that self-harm was, and I quote, perfectly normal teenage behaviour. The parents persisted and a referral to CAMS was made. CAMS responded by saying that the child wasn't sick enough. In March this year, the child told her father that she was feeling really bad and wanted to kill herself. He took her to Frimley Park Hospital. a CAMS bed was sought for her. The closest available bed at that time was Edinburgh. During her 10-day stay in Frimley Park, an acute medical hospital, not a psychiatric hospital, her condition deteriorated to the point where she had to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. She was sent to a psychiatric hospital near Hastings. It was a 145-mile round trip. In hospital, she was diagnosed as being autistic, a condition for which the hospital had no expertise. Despite the Code of Practice to the Mental Health Act stating that compulsory treatment in a hospital setting is rarely likely to be helpful to a person with autism, she was detained in that hospital for 6 months. Her experience in hospital was not good. She learnt lots of new behaviours and ways to self-harm. On one occasion, when she was having an autistic meltdown, the staff on duty called the police to restrain her. A vulnerable, sick, 15-year-old girl, dragged to the floor by 2 police officers, handcuffed and taken out of the hospital and put alone in the back of a police car. It was only the intervention of the responsible clinician that stopped them from taking her away from a place of safety. She was discharged in August, 2 weeks before her appeal to the Mental Health Tribunal was due to be heard. She was discharged with what is known as a 117 care plan, a plan whose purpose is to prevent her from going back into hospital. It took Aldershot CAMS 10 weeks to put a care coordinator in place. None of the identified treatments have been put in place. So of course, despite the best efforts of her parents to keep her safe, her condition has deteriorated. Last Sunday, the child had a really bad autistic meltdown. An ambulance was called and she was taken to Frimley Park Hospital. Frimley Park are detaining her, but are refusing to admit her onto a ward, saying they do not have a suitable bed. At 16, she is too old for paediatrics and too young for an adult ward, and they don't want a psychiatric patient blocking up a medical bed. Frimley Park is regarded as a place of safety. Outside of office hours, Frimley Park does not have a children's psychiatric liaison, so don't have a crisis in the evening or at weekends. She's now been in A&E for more than 100 hours waiting for a hospital bed. On Monday, she walked out of the busy A&E department. She phoned the ambulance service and told them to come and pick her body up. She walked through Frimley High Street and climbed over the railings of a bridge that crosses the A331 near Farnborough Gate. She phoned her father, who was 20 miles away. He alerted the emergency services while staying on the phone, trying to remind her of all the positive things in her life. A passerby managed to persuade her to return, to climb back over the railings. She was picked up by the ambulance service and returned to Frimley. She has made 3 further attempts to flee the A&E department. A busy accident and emergency department is no place to treat a vulnerable young person suffering from a mental illness. But there is no emergency psychiatric provision. Frimley Park's safeguarding manager told the girl's parents that they cannot provide a full-time mental health nurse and therefore cannot keep her safe. They have asked the parents to keep her safe while she remains at Frimley. CAMS say there are no psychiatric beds available anywhere in the country. Meanwhile, this 16-year-old vulnerable child is crying out for help. So rather than debating pointless motions, our scrutiny committees should be investigating the appalling state of local mental health services. We should be asking Sussex Partnerships why they are providing such a poor CAMS service locally. Surrey CAMS has a far better service. Why are the CCG commissioning and paying for such a rubbish service? And why don't Frimley Park Healthcare have an emergency psychiatric provision when they are designated a place of safety? It's time to hold our health providers to account. So in this time of Advent, yes, I'm looking forward to a time when we have proper mental health care provision, with services fully resourced and people like Elizabeth can access the support and care she needs. I shall be returning to Elizabeth's bed after this meeting to watch her drift off to sleep. My wife and I will be there tomorrow morning when she wakes, doing what parents across the globe do, day in and day out, keeping her safe and looking forward with hope.
Councillor David Clifford.
Right. Okay. Well, I think following that, I wish I'd indicated a little earlier, maybe, to speak about this motion. I think that drives home. We can be frivolous here, can't we? And throw abuses across the room. And I think every parent here, heart goes out to Morris and his wife. We cannot imagine the stresses that would be involved in that. It is extremely sobering. I have to say I was a little disappointed at the motion. I was going to be quite frivolous and say how you were Luddites and how I've got my Fitbit and we ought to embrace new technology and new ideas. But Morris has brought quite a sober atmosphere to this debate, which I have to say Morris is absolutely right, and I'm glad that you've done that. The whole drive for these new accountable care organisations is joining up clinical services. Now, the example that I read about before I came to the meeting in New Zealand was that where it's working in the country, the clinical services are actually working together in collaboration. The story that Morris has portrayed of one where the clinicians are not collaborating. That's where the focus should be. And my goodness, it begs us to really sober up and look at the best possible outcomes that we can have locally, and put away the dogma, put away. I really did have a little bit of issue with backdoor development and privatisation. The NHS has mooted and pushed the accountable care organisations forward, supported by the government. That's not reflected in the motion. Developing privatisation through the back door, that's not happening. The organisation that we've got locally is an NHS organisation charity. Goes on to talk about US concept. What's wrong with US concepts? You know, I've got an iPhone. I've just said I've got an iBit that my wife's given me to monitor my heartbeat and all sorts of things. There's some great things that come out from US concepts. Clinical care plans started in the 1930s in America. So what is so bad about this US concept? I also am disappointed that there's not more of a local focus about what we're doing. I think us as a local authority have done an awful lot more than ever's been done before with our local NHS. Now I've had the opportunity of opting into a private healthcare plan. Like Keith, I thought you were in an Ericsson one, Councillor, but I completely will not have a private health plan. I am absolutely committed to the NHS. I think it could be superb service. And the accountable care organisations are the way to go. I'm disappointed that there wasn't more research done with regard to this notice of motion to what we are doing locally. It was stated earlier, we've been looking and working with vanguard groups that are looking at this, and it's not sustainable and transformation programs,
I think sustainability and transformation partnerships, isn't it? That are looking at how we can improve local services, joining them all up. We as an authority are looking with the CCG to get better health centre in Southwood. We are doing an awful lot, and there's a lot more to be done. Now, I contacted Andrew Morris about this motion, and I'm going to read very quickly his reply, because it pretty much sums up how I feel about this. Talking about this motion, he said, "This is disappointing to see. The Frimley system concept is based on us all working together to deliver better and social care to local residents." One thing we keep asking for. This has absolutely nothing to do with privatising the NHS. We want to work differently to develop services out of hospital, and our services will continue to be for public good. If it would help, I and other colleagues would be happy to brief the Council on how we are working with North East Hand CCG to improve care for residents. We have just been given 20 million to improve community services because we are a forward-leading system. And so it's disappointing to see that our work is just not understood by a key stakeholder. And I move that this motion be supported, or withdraw it, and let's get it in to a panel where we can get the Chief Executive and his team in to explain it so that we don't get silly motions.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. Councillor Frank Rust. Can I just mention Councillor Rust is the final speaker?
Sounds a bit ominous. Knowing that there's a way that our amendments, motions are usually hijacked, I thought I'd prepare something more general to cover all, and it happens to cover all. The health business, like the NHS, is unlike any conventional business. The normal rules are that the more efficient it is, the less it costs. In health, however, the more efficient it is, the more it costs. Better diagnosis equipment, more specialised training, newer drugs cost more, but then enable more conditions to be treated and therefore open up new markets which weren't available before. So therefore people live longer, and older people tend to have more multiple long-term conditions, which are a further drain on the finances of health and social care. It is a fact that just to stand still, the NHS requires a 4% annual increase in finance. But one opportunity is to allow people to get more involved in their own health and care and be offered the information and support to manage their medical conditions. More care should be delivered in people's homes or closer to home with greater investment in district nursing, general practice and social care. Plans to integrate care encompassing health, social care, primary, secondary care, physical and mental health services should be accelerated. Much priority should be given to public health and prevention through partnerships between local government, the NHS and other organisations working in population health systems. The aim should be to fully engage the public in tackling the causes of ill health and supporting people to remain in good health for as long as possible. Action by government is also needed to reverse the rising tide of obesity and other major risk factors. Hence my submission to the local plan. Why is the government not persuaded that NHS crisis is around the corner? Some ministers take an even tougher line, believing there is considerable scope to increase NHS efficiency, and that is only happen when the leaders of the NHS realise that more money will not be found. Arguments the NHS is a bottomless pit, will use whatever funding is provided and keep on coming back for more, may not be a common view amongst the current crop of ministers, but nor is it an exceptional view. Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive of the NHS, has warned about the impact of continuing financial constraints, and what is clear is that there are significant risks for the government in ignoring these and other warnings in view of the attachment that public feel towards the NHS and evidences that services are being stretched to limits. Britain's status as an increasingly low spender might mean the NHS cannot deliver improvements in the quality of care and outcomes from treatment that patients want. No amount of spin from ministers can disguise the fact that this decade is set to be marked by the longest and deepest squeeze on NHS finances in a generation. Our country is increasingly looking like the sick person of Europe, with spending on health falling far behind other neighbouring countries. This squeeze on health spending is bad for the NHS, it's bad for patients. It's clear our health system is going to need more money than this government is prepared to spend. The additional money for the NHS is a welcome shot in the arm as services struggle to meet rising demand for services, but it's still significantly less than the £4 billion estimated the NHS needs next year. Even with additional funding, the NHS will struggle to meet key targets and provide the investment needed in services such as general practice and mental health. The significant increase in capital spending after several years of capital budgets being raided to cover deficits is good news. But to deliver the £10 billion package promised by the Chancellor, considerable sums of money will need to be raised through the NHS land sales and other means to top up the £4 billion of extra government investment needed. It's encouraging the government is prepared to fund pay rises for nurses and other key staff on top of this extra funding, as long as agreement can be reached on new contracts, whatever that means. I'm disappointed, though, that the Chancellor did not find any extra funding for social care, which now faces a £2.5 billion funding gap by 2019-20. While the forthcoming Green Paper offers a prospect of reform, any meaningful change is a long way off, and will be of little comfort to the many people who need help now but cannot access it.
Councillor Mike Roberts, be somewhat please on the amendment.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Interesting. I never knew that Rod was, unlike me, a 1948 baby. I was one of those who were delivered in the NHS almost in the first few months. So that is something which I will always commend with regard to the position of the NHS in my sort of lifestyle over the years. The founding features of the NHS are all about support in its widest sense. As Councillor Dibble has already said, if one remembers what healthcare was like before the NHS came in, where in many communities you had to have welfare support and paying so much per week, whether you could afford it or not, to have some basic healthcare. And after 1948 we had a system whereby everybody had the same access to healthcare, which was important. It's been important all through our lives, but there's been this gradual chipping away in recent years. And yes, it did start with Tony Blair, and we've got one of those at the Aldershot Centre for Health. There has to be a radical reappraisal of that concept and system. But what we can't go on is keep on allowing these overtures from various parts of the drug industry, taking us for a ride by giving us non-proprietary drugs when we could buy them cheaper, by coming in with new concepts which again are going to be costly as regards outturn and their effect. And also now in a situation where after 7 barren years of financial support to those who actually work in the NHS, the nurses, for example, still haven't had a pay rise indicated, but it's going to be on the basis of efficiency savings, and we all know what that is. The other thing the NHS doesn't have under this government is an estate project set up. It has got no idea of how it needs to manage its estates and actually have a benefit, rather than flogging NHS estates off, there needs to manage that relationship with the history and also the land use value of those particular sites, not only for the current but also for the future. It is very much a matter of real concern, not just because the money never came and was never forthcoming in the Chancellor's speech, whether it be on social care, whether it be on a number of key issues as well. I know the local government...
Councillor Mike Roberts, please sum up. And that doesn't mean advising what the government should be doing.
The motion by Rod is, yes, it is one of those particular one theme motions, but it's not the reality of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and what's going to happen with regard to both health and social care in the very near future. And so therefore I personally won't support it because it is just a statement of fact, but not a statement of action.
Thank you. I now put the amended motion to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
Right, sorry, can I have we're voting on the amendment. No, sorry, we are voting on whether the amendment be accepted. Can I? Is that the case?
That's right.
Because you did say the motion, and I wasn't sure that we had a motion yet. Thank you. Keep trying to pay attention up there.
That's carries.
Hang on, get a vote against it, have we?
Yeah, wake up.
You just missed that wake up.
Moving on.
Sorry, are we now going to take a vote on the amended motion?
It's done.
I didn't hear that.
Councillor Jones, if you're not listening, I'm sorry, I'm not repeating myself. We're moving on to Article 6 of the agenda.
So we are not taking. Madam Mayor, we have just taken a vote on the amendment. Is that correct?
Correct.
We now have an amended motion. Right, are we going to vote on the amended motion or are we going to ignore it? That's a simple point of order.
We just voted
We have voted on the amendment.
on the amendment.
Right, can we now take a vote on the motion?
Yes, you can.
Right. Go on then.
So, those for the amended motion, that's now the motion.
We've got to argue against it.
All those for. Those against.
You can't say that. It was against the NHS.
Well, it seems like your party is So, moving on, item 6 on the agenda is to consider a recommendation of the Cabinet on a medium-term financial strategy 2017 to 2018 to 2020 and 2021. I call upon Councillor Paul Taylor to introduce the Cabinet report.
Only one.
Madam Mayor, I'm listening up on the road, so I'm not anyway, can anybody hear me? And we're going to listen anyway. I'll keep it as brief as possible. Nothing can be more exciting than what we just had. So, we have proposed to the Council the medium-term financial strategy 2017-18 to 2020-2021. Just a few words, if I may, quite short, I promise you. Over the next 3 to 4 years, a lot is going to happen which will affect our budget, and for which we have been planning and continue to plan very carefully. The major item, as you are all aware, is the death of the RSG, Revenue Support Grant, in 2019-2020. Obviously it hasn't been to National Health Service. This is accompanied by changes to the business rate scheme, hardening rules for the new homes burners, and the multi-year supplement offer in 2019-20. There are other potential policy issues, such as restricting the ability of local authorities to invest in commercial properties, the possible impacts of budget cuts on Hampshire County Council, and any effects of leaving the EU. These, in addition to allowing for estimated staff pay rises and the anticipated level of council tax rise, all have to be considered when plotting our course over the next 4 years. And remember that this must, due to the various unknowns, be a very broad strategy, not a detailed budget, which members will consider at the February 2018 meeting. The details as contained in Appendix A are largely as before, based on the aim of maintaining our present level of services, a prudent approach to investment, and an even tighter control on expenditure than we have had to exercise so far, and through the internal budget challenge and the work of the cross-party budget strategy group exploring new possibilities of income generation. With the continuing need for regeneration and business growth, it will not always be easy and it may even require us to take very difficult decisions at times. I strongly recommend this Council support for the strategy before you tonight.
Is there a second then? Councillor Mostia? Councillor Alex Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd first like to pay tribute to the detailed work of the Finance Department and the other council staff in their efforts to reduce net service costs in line with the government's austerity plan, which is cutting grant to local government to zero in the period ahead, as Councillor Taylor said. Now, I had the interesting question posed to me yesterday at the peer challenge session, yesterday afternoon, which the Cabinet Member for Corporate Services might like to answer. Why does Rushmore have a reputation for consistently underspending? You might also like to update us on the long-heralded business rates retention scheme, which was supposed to go some way towards replacing government grants, but which now seems to involve the government retaining all the business rates, just as the government grant is being cut to zero. I note in the report that whereas 2 years ago we were assured that accepting a multi-year settlement offer from government would provide a level of certainty for planning services, but we now learn that certainty over future funding is vastly reduced. How serious are the consequences for this council? And there was mention in the report of a technical consultation on next year's local government finance settlement. What are the implications for this council, and what submission did this council make? And from the Appendix A to the report, it seems that this council is again underspending significantly. So will the Cabinet Member for Corporate Services look at staff redundancy to see whether it can be avoided, as the services provided locally are needed by the community? Finally, I note in Appendix A, that's on page 21, there is a requirement to ensure that proposals for significant projects and changes are set out in an appropriate business case to assess the impact on the council. Would the Cabinet Member explain how this is being applied to the compulsory purchase of properties, for example, in Aldershot Town Centre?
which would have been quite nice as a pre-recorded questions, I think, for me as a cabinet member, because that's quite a lot to answer in one go, if you realise that. And yes, an underspending council, when actually we have kept very carefully to what we can, the money that we do have. And in fact, the point that was put to me was not actually that we were an underspending council, but actually we are, we're not careful, that we already show a funding gap of 2.2 million. But actually we've already used reserves quite a bit. We do use reserves over this time. So it hasn't been our gift to really spend more money. It's been about prudence and about not spending any more than we actually have. We can't spend money we don't have. And I don't make any apologies for that either. The question of business rates is actually, the difficulty was, the great idea was that we would retain 50% of business rates, and it's proposed that it will now be 100%. But of course there's all sorts of caveats to that as well, these are offered as business rates. We don't actually know what is going to happen about the smoothing or the equalisation from ourselves to other councils, because it's not just simple that the more money we have in business rates, well, the more we can go away and jolly, spend on a jolly. We can't do that, because that money is going to be equalised out across other authorities, not just in this region, but across the country. And usually we don't have enough detail of this. I mean, you know as well as I do, because I know you've been in to look at this, the difficulty of actually dealing with appeals just as they come in means that we do have to provide reserves for this. And this has been audited, it's been looked at by actually other councils who come in and actually praise the way we actually do this. And it's a complicated calculation, and you know that because you've seen it yourself. So we can't just go and spend it in anticipation that we will get money from these business rates. We are a growing borough, as you know, and actually doing a lot for business anyway as we can. But obviously we would like to be able to keep as much as we can and use that. I hope that growth will come despite the equalisation, and will actually enable us to generate more income to spend on regeneration, on social housing, etc. in due course, because I know that's what you're actually looking for. That's what we're looking for too, because we want to be able to do that. The local government finance settlement technical consultation, I can't read it out to you now, it's not here, but we did obviously respond, and I'm sure that will be available with a written answer. Thank you very much.
Councillor Michael.
Yes, Mayor. Thanks very much, Chair of Corporate, for looking to give aspects of the responses to Councillor Crawford. But could you, unlike David Davis, could you look at EQIAs in relationship to a number of those points? The reason I asked for equality impact assessments is you will be aware that in the last few days the Social Mobility Commission report suggested, unlike the government, that inequality in this country is getting worse, and pressures on particular communities and wards, of which we have a number, is also worsening as well. So we need to look at what we're doing and what the impact assessments are likely to be now, and also the next 2 or 3 years while the spend review runs to 2021. The other aspect which you never mentioned, one of the aspects which really concerns many people in local government is yet again in the 40-page submission by the Local Government Association for the budget, which went up by 1.3 billion to 7.1 billion from 5.8 billion. The government responded not at all. And yet again we've had a consistency of the local government side not being responded to, whether it be social care, whether it be housing except with strings attached, whether it be business rates or whatever. And I'm just wondering now what further discussions this council, via yourself and the leader, will be having with Gary Porter to actually seek to get our views across prior to next year's spring statement, which may be more of the same rather than giving something to local government which has been completely neglected so far.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, you're on? We were.
Thank you. Well, as I've said, I don't think I can answer in saying what all our detailed plans are going to be. I've said already it's going to be a difficult course to negotiate. That will include quite a few other things you just suggested. We'll be talking to central government via LGA, I must admit. I mean, things are submitted to LGA. I think there's a sense of frustration in the finance team as well, and in the council generally, throughout the country as well. But we will remember that there's not a lot of money centrally in this country anyway available. So, as I say, do the best with the money that they have as well. Terms of austerity affect everybody, and they affect us as well. I don't always think everything is fair. But life isn't fair, and for us, we do the best we can with what we have available. And we will, I promise you, we will do everything we can to negotiate via the LGA. If it means people are going up to see Mr. Porter, then fine, no doubt somebody might do that. But it's too early to say that at this stage. Just be aware that we will take all measures we can to make it as fair as possible for the members of the borough. And actually, just on a point of tax, in the recent budget, our tax cuts were for lowest earners, and some of them taking some of them out of tax altogether. That's a side issue, that's a central government issue. We're talking here about local government issue and talking about the medium-term forecast, not actually particularly tax cuts.
So now the recommendation will go to vote. All those in favour, please show. Those against? That's carried. Item 7 on the agenda is questions for the Cabinet. I can report that no questions have been submitted for the Cabinet. Item 8 on the agenda is reports of Cabinets and Committees. Would you please turn to page 23 for the reports of the Cabinets and Committees, which are for information. I will call the pages over. Please indicate clearly if you wish to ask any questions. Page 23. Page 24.
Why were the members of the Welfare Reform Task and Finish Group not consulted about the contents of this very important public consultation?
Councillor Crawford, would you indicate which paragraph is speaking?
I said page 24.
Yeah,
sorry, I thought there was one paragraph on there. Paragraph
okay, so under which section?
Third.
Councillor Gareth.
Thank you very much, Madam. Yeah, they were consulted.
Thank you.
Charge for that.
Page 25.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Susan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Page 25, item number 39. Can I ask, please, that consideration is given when undertaking this study that the North Lane and Ashford area be included, as they are the major feeder roads to the 331. Over the last few years, the amount of traffic has drastically increased using these roads out onto the 331, and residents have informed us, and as ward members for North Town, my colleagues and I are very concerned about the deterioration of air quality in that area, and we'd ask, please, that the 331 feeder roads in Aldershot be included in the survey. Thank you.
Councillor Martin Tennant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Air quality is a really important issue for all of our residents. The piece of work which we're being asked to undertake on behalf of DEFRA is set out very clearly in what scope falls within it. However, I can assure you I will ensure that sufficient monitoring of the area you mentioned is taking place, whether or not it falls into the remit of the DEFRA project they've asked us to do.
Page 26, page 27.
Item 42, and Councillor Porter did submit these questions in advance. So this is at the Victoria Road Chapel, and the report that the Cabinet considered stated in July 2016 fire caused by 2 Sea Scouts practicing their fire lighting skills at the chapel caused extensive damage to the roof structure, resulting in the roof being demolished. What was the source of this statement? That's that question. On the same item, a national newspaper stated that 2 schoolboys were arrested on suspicion of burning down the historic chapel, and that police were questioning them about the alleged arson after they apparently filmed themselves. The Snapchat video was shared on Facebook. What was the conclusion of the police investigation, and was the council made aware of that conclusion? Now, the costs that fell on the council were also referred to. What was the cost of the initial protective support before scaffold was erected? And what was the cost of scaffold from December 2016 to date?
Councillor Porter.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Crawford, I have got an answer on the costs. I don't have a full answer on the source of the report, etc. I know it was reported in the national newspaper, and I will find that out and send you a written report on that, a written answer on that part. But with regards to the costs, from commissioning on 16th of December 2016 until 15th of June 2017, the cost of the scaffolding was £15,184. That was the original cost. It was actually renegotiated and a small reduction achieved, and therefore the cost was reduced to £10,867. This covers dates from 16th of June 2017 to 12th of November 2017, and from 13th of November the cost of the scaffold has been incorporated into the price of works for the new structural roof, which you'll know from the Cabinet report is £44,000. Therefore, anyway, the total cost for the erection and hire of the scaffold from 16th of December 2016 to November 2017 is £26,051 plus that. That's 50p as well. The only protection afforded to the chapel prior to the erection of the scaffold was harassed fencing, metal fence panels in other words, positioned to the perimeter of the building. From my research, the harassed fencing was initially hired for a short time, then directly purchased by the council around 2003. They have not been able to ascertain the cost, or determine the cost of who authorised the purchase. This is 14 years ago, and I think so far they have not found that out. So that is the information I've got on that part. And if there are any other, I can send you that in written reply as well if you like, in case you haven't got all that down. But we'll also reply about the a written reply on the source of the report in the first place.
What about the police investigation?
That's the police investigation. That part I don't have a full answer on that yet, and I'll let you have it in a written answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Clive Grafton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the money being spent on securing and websiting the actual building itself. I'm a little bit concerned that we got a predicted cost of £262,000 for the conversion to a columbarium, with no reference to what income the columbarium will actually return if it was converted to that. But there's no cost to the conversion to a domestic dwelling put into this report, but there is an indication that we get a letting fee from it. So could we actually enhance that so we know exactly how these funds are and the difference between turning it into a compound and a domestic dwelling, please? Thank you.
As regards to columbarium, that's as a proposal put together by the Farmer Society, and the cost was estimated at 263,000. I think that is probably on the high side, but at this stage it was an estimate. As regards a business case, which would include income, that is for the Farmer Society. They have not put that together yet. I would probably work on it together if we're going to go ahead with that, but that is not known yet at all. And the second part of your question?
About cost of converting it to a
well, that would come through as a completely separate exercise, like a business proposal for converting it at the time. That is not in play at all at present. That will come forward by planning, etc. if it gets to that stage, and that's could be 2 years off yet. So it's a long time hence.
Page 28.
28, Madam Mayor. Item 3. Does the portfolio holder for corporate services agree with me and welcome the news that this legal problem has now been resolved and the sale of land completed and tenants are now being given move dates into their new homes in Nursery Close and Bark Road?
Councillor Taylor, show.
Well, I welcome it, yes. I trust, more important than I might welcome it, I hope the residents welcome it. And your members in Northtown. Obviously, just a few words, and it was actually, we moved the thing forward, as I said I would at the meeting the other evening.
A supplementary, Madam Mayor, could I thank the portfolio holder on behalf of the residents of Northtown and my colleague Sue Dibble and Frank Russ for his support in using his best efforts to speed this up, and thank the Cabinet, one, for allowing me to address them, and their support. And thank the officers as well for their support. But does he agree with me that it was very novel to see, for once, a Tory cabinet in this country united? Thank you.
Almost as long as
Thank you. Can I call upon the Leader of the Council to introduce the report of meeting, Cabinet meeting held on the 14th of November 2017?
Pleased to present the report of the Cabinet meeting on pages 29 to 35.
Is there a seconder? Page 29.
Could I ask portfolio holder that with the great increase that the savings we've had on the recycling section, could I ask him with the increase on the fly tipping that's been happening in the area, is that taken into account on the added value, and will Serco actually be absorbing that cost? And also with the new champions, I would like to know how far we got on with the new champions about the iPads that they will be doing to actually report items around the area. Thank you.
the cost of fly tipping is a cost that the council bear itself, and the clean-up. The new champions are working on quite well, I believe, and names have been suggested in various locations, and we're waiting for Serco to finalise that. I hope that answers your question.
Page 30.
Page 30, Madam Mayor. Item 49, annual review of fees and charges. Could my dear friend, the Cabinet member for corporate services, please confirm what the agreed increase was for the fees at the crematorium? Is it the 5% that was in the report to Cabinet, or was it a lower figure in line with inflation? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is it buried somewhere else?
We're not in a cremation.
It was higher.
Okay. Could the supplementary question, Madam Mayor, it might fall off my Christmas card, isn't it? Could he please justify why there is an increase for cremation charges when every other fee appeared to be either zero increase or in line with inflation? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Muscat will answer that question.
Oh, there you go. The justification is very simply that we can bear the cost, or the cost is bearable. That's the justification. We have to make savings, we have to cover our costs. There's one area where we can. Simple as that.
Am I allowed a supplementary because a different person answered?
If the members can deal with it, yes.
Well, very kind. Very kind. I was looking at, I spent the evening looking at this arena. It's like an advent calendar, isn't it? Councillor Cliff and Gideon on every day. You open it up and there. Anyway, can I?
Just jealous.
Does the deputy leader agree with me that this council does some things good, but some things not so good? And does he agree with me that historically, over the last 15 years, we have tended to increase cremation charges above inflation? And I don't want to joke about it, but it's not something that people, shop around for. They tend to use their local crematorium, and it's, in a sense, I think it's just easy money from people at a very emotional and vulnerable time. And in future, could we try and at least keep it in line with inflation? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Noted.
Thank you. Noted to Cabinet.
Page 31. Page 32.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's the second.
Thank you. This is to do with point 53, Voyager House. Since the Cabinet has given its wholehearted support to the compulsory purchase of the Voyager House in the Southwood area of Farnborough for use as an integrated health centre, which would be far from an easy place to reach by public transport, would the portfolio holder now confirm, if not now then perhaps at an appropriate time, that he will categorically ensure that the financially bereft County Council will never cut funding to the Dial a Ride service or community bus services, that he will ensure that the County Council introduces and greatly increases bus services to the new health centre, and that all vehicle parking at the health centre will be completely free of charge. All of these transport facilities to be agreed before the health centre opens and to be provided in perpetuity. Thank you.
There is a bus stop outside the boiler anyway, and the service.
One an hour.
We can't govern what Hampshire County Council are going to do, but it is on the agenda that we will actually do everything we can to ensure the service is as the best it can be for our residents.
Can I just ask, the bus, I believe, is the number 9 bus, and it's once an hour, at very limited times. Is that satisfactory?
No. No, I guess it probably is not, but that's something that obviously we're not going to change that until we actually take possession of the Voyager House and until we can change it as well. But it is in the plan to negotiate that.
I'd like to clarify with your permission, Madam. Thank you very much. Yeah, just for clarification, we're really proud of the work that we're doing with the local CCG. we talked about a new health centre in the town centre quarter. That wasn't appropriate. They were really keen that it was in this area, and we're working hand in glove with the CCG, because this, with their experience dealing with patients week in, week out, day in, day out, hourly, this was the best location, which is why we've committed to this.
Yeah, thank you.
Page 33, page 34, page 35. I call upon the chairman of the Licensing and General Purposes Committee to introduce the report of the meeting held on the 25th of September.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I present the minutes from the Licensing and General Purposes Committee from 25th September. That's minutes numbers 14 through to 18. Thank you.
Is there a second? Page 37, page 38, page 39, page 40, page 41. I call upon the chairman of the Development and Management Committee to introduce the report of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2017.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to present the minutes of the Development and Management Committee meeting held on the 8th of November 2017, pages 42 to 44.
Is there a seconder? Councillor John Arnold. Page 42, page 43, page 44. The other pages are appendices. Item 9 on the agenda is reports of policy and review panels. The reports of the policy and review panels are for noting. That concludes the business for the meeting of the council. As this is the last council meeting before Christmas, and if you still have the energy, I would like to invite you all to join me for a short reception in the Bolton Room. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy, prosperous New Year.